Hey folks, have a fun one for you today. Hopped on with Javier Reyes of LockedOn Padres to talk the curious case of Mackenzie Gore. From top prospect to back in the complex league. What happened and was it the Yips?
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, baseball writer for Sports Illustrated. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. And had a fun one here. Really just wanted to talk deep dive on one thing. So, Mackenzie Gore, what the heck happened? Had a good chat with Javier Reyes about it. Check it out.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special Locked On, not just Padres, it's a Locked On crossover, and I'm being joined by the new host of Locked On MLB Prospects, my co-hosts for the day, Lindsey Crosby. Sir, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I am excited that at least one of us knows they're getting spring training soon. Because the minor leaguers have to report. They don't have an option.
That's absolutely right, man. And look, it's a hard world that we live in. Let me tell you, it is a hard world that we live in. But if you guys couldn't tell, we're gonna be talking about some prospect stuff. And since it's what better to discuss than an episode all about Gore, guys? It's gonna be a good one because Mackenzie Gore is, look, I don't know too much about the intricacies of prospect work. I've been slowly ingratiating myself more into, the systems and stuff like that over the years, especially since I started hosting this here podcast. But I've really found it that Mackenzie Gore is just, I don't remember the last kind of player that was like this, Lindsey. You know what I'm saying? And I've had old host of Locked On MLB Prospects, Arm Layton, on the show to talk about it, but I've never talked about Mackenzie Gore specifically. And just the fact that we are specifically talking about him for one episode, I really do think is a perfect summation of like how crazy the sort of, saga has been for this guy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Mackenzie Gore's a guy, first round pick out of high school. At one point in time, he is the number one pitching prospect in all of baseball. And this guy looks like a sure thing. And then he just forgets how to pitch. And I mean, he goes from like the alternate site to AAA El Paso, gets absolutely destroyed, spends 2 months at the spring training complex, not in rookie ball, just at the complex, and then comes back and makes it all the way back to AA, and then goes to the Arizona Fall League after the season and throws up a 6 ERA. Like, there's so many things you can look at with this situation and just ask, like, what is going on, or what happened, or what's going to happen from here. But like, the thing for Mackenzie Gore that I think about, and when you're looking at a prospect and you're trying to figure out how to value this guy, what is he going to be? You kind of look at the quality of his stuff now and then project out what it could be. And like, Mackenzie Gore, even now, has the best fastball in the Padres system. I mean, it's such a great pitch. I mean, he can throw this fastball, 98 if he needs to, and then you throw in a mid-80s slider that breaks really well, like a 1-7 curveball, a changeup. They all look like they're plus pitches, and you see this. He's got great athleticism, obviously, and this is the makings of a guy that's like a front rotation starter. You see why he's the number one prospect in baseball, and then, like I said, he just kind of forgets how to pitch. And I want to ask you, as somebody who's probably seen more Mackenzie Gore than I have, is this the Yips? Or is it something like mechanical or physical?
It feels like it's a bunch of things based on what I've heard, right? With this leg kick that I keep hearing about and what have you. I mean, maybe it's thing, but it's like just the little why, again, as someone who's not like an expert or whatnot, I mean, look, before we even started recording this podcast, we were having issues with setting up audio and whatnot. So I can imagine that pitching professional baseball, there's all sorts of things that go into that. But for me, it was like, I just remember just starting to look at the Padres system, which was once believed to be like the best system in Major League history. It had so much upside, so many different guys, and some of it is gone now. And Gore was literally the top pitching prospect in baseball, right? And that was so exciting for a team that really hadn't had an ace pitcher since basically Jake Peavy. And you had a couple years there with a guy like Tyson Ross and whatever before the comments. People get mad at me. Yes, there's been some good years, Matt Latos and such, but this was like a guy who was called Clayton Kershaw, right? And I think that Clark Schmidt that he was compared to by Fangraphs? I forgot who it was. Clark something. It was a Phillies Hall of Fame pitcher. I forgot on it right now, but they're like that was the comp that he was getting. And then all of a sudden, a year and a half later, he's outside of most top lists. Like, when was this is a little bit of a side question to what you said, but I just thought of it. Do you remember a prospect falling this much before it's not like they debuted? You know what I mean? It's not like he's actually made it to the majors and we're like, oh, okay, this guy isn't as good as we thought. It is still a guy that's in the minors who was sought so highly and then has fallen so precipitously.
So, like, off the top of my head, I can't think of a guy who had a drop like this that wasn't due to injury or, like you said, debuting and just looking bad. Like, everybody that I think about that has fallen down boards, and current player example, Christian Pache. He was seen as like a generational player in the Braves system. I mean, like they said, he might be the best. Who that is, yeah, like he might be the best outfield defender since Andrew Jones, and Andrew Jones was one of the best outfield defenders of all time. And all of this stuff. He has a great 2020 NLDS. He comes in and plays like 3 or 4 games, looks great, and then starts off, and he's fallen down boards now. He's not number 1 prospect in Atlanta anymore, and they're just hoping to get any sort of offensive contribution out of him. But it's because he played 30-something games in MLB last year and looked bad and then got hurt and then never really looked back to normal form. And I just can't think of a guy who didn't get hurt, didn't debut in MLB and look bad, and still fell this hard. And it's like, it's odd because he has all of the parts still. Like, he still has the fastball. It's still a 98 mile an hour pitch. He still has a good curveball. He has the slider, but for some reason, it doesn't all come together on the mound. And a lot of people have kind of written off Mackenzie Gore, and I think that might actually be good for him. And like I think it's good for him because at this point, I'm convinced that it's got to be something mental. I did a lot of prep for this podcast, pretty much by researching the Yips. I like, not joking. I read Rick Ankiel's book. I listened to some interviews with him, some other people. And I kind of have an interesting connection to this too. So I live in Auburn, Alabama. It's a college town. And every Friday night, me and my family go watch the gymnasts perform. And I get to watch Olympic gold medalist Suni Lee perform. And the only reason Suni Lee got a gold medal was because Simone Biles had to withdraw from some events at the Olympics because she had the twisties. And the twisties are the gymnastics version of the Yips. And in essence, the twisties are when you're in the air, your body can't figure out where it is. And so it's dangerous to keep performing because you might get hurt. And I feel like Mackenzie Gore still has all the physical talents. He's healthy. For some reason, his body can't figure out where all of its parts are during the pitch. I believe like the sensation of knowing where your arms are is called proprioception. Like, he just doesn't have it. And I don't, I want to know what was the thing that broke. Like, what was the one thing Rick Ankiel talks about? He was in the playoffs and he's starting game 1 of the NLDS against Greg Maddux. And he goes out there, gets through 2 innings. Greg Maddux gives up 6 runs. And then he goes out in the 3rd inning and he throws a cutter and it misses. And then he throws a curveball and he bounces it. And he ends up throwing 5 wild pitches in the inning and they pull him out. And he said, like, something just broke in that 3rd inning. When I started Like when I threw a warm-up pitch, it didn't feel right, and I started to question it. And when I started to question it, it started spiraling. And so what was that thing for Mackenzie Gore? Because the reports we got from this was it happened while he was at the alternate site.
Yeah.
It wasn't in actual competition. It was at the alternate site. And so what was that thing that led to it? Was it actually mental? Was it the yips? Or is it just a mechanical issue where he tried to fix something with his, like fix his leg kick or fix something in his delivery, and it just completely threw him on a whack?
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't necessarily know exactly what it was that broke. Oh, and hey, look, things break all the time. My brain broke before I said Clark Schmidt. It was actually Steve Carlton I was referring to, by the way, Phillies Hall of Fame pitcher. But I actually have another good comparison for Mackenzie Gore that I just thought of at the top of my head. Long-time listeners of the pod know I love the cross-referencing and whatnot. But before we get into that, let me tell you guys something about something that never breaks. It never falters. It is the most trustworthy product in the universe, dare I say. Maybe not the universe. I don't know what the aliens and stuff got. But I will tell you, on planet Earth, man, protein bars. You know what?
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. All Built Bars are covered 100% real chocolate, the puffs included. If you don't know about the puffs, you haven't tried the puffs, you're missing out. It's the first protein-infused marshmallow. So whether it's a Built Bar or it's a puff, 100% real chocolate, usually 130 calories, 17 grams of protein. So go to Built.com, check out all the flavors. If it's the puffs, there's things like churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. If it's the bars, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, white chocolate cookies and cream is a brand new one, coconut almond, Rocky Road's one of the seasonal ones they rotate in and out. Go to Built.com to check out the list of everything that's available. While you're there, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. That's promo code LOCKED15 at Built.com.
Hopefully everybody enjoyed that little sponsor ad break there, everybody. Just because, I know they're on, everybody who's listening, they're on the edge of their seat. What is the comparison I have for Mackenzie
What's the
Gore,
comp?
right? What's the comp, right? I got an NBA player for all of you. You ready? Markelle Fultz. All right? Remember, for every NBA fan, and here's why I say this, because Markelle Fultz was a guy who was a top 3 consensus kind of pick for college basketball. And then he comes to the draft. He's the first overall pick in the draft. And then all of a sudden, before he makes his debut, as we were mentioning before, he just kind of breaks. His shot is broken. He shoots the ball like he has the yips. I didn't even know that was possible in basketball, to be honest with you. And that happens all of a sudden, and that was part of his skill set. He was a slasher. He drove to the rim, and he could also pull up from 3. He could do everything. And then he just has magically a new shot. It just changes. And then what happens? There are all the conspiracies, right? What happened is there was a conspiracy that he actually got in a motorcycle accident. They were covering it up and all that stuff. And with the Padres case and Mackenzie Gore, it's a little similar. All of a sudden, this alternate site thing comes in there, and it's not a thing of, okay, he's got, like, it's not like there was one, I don't know how to even explain it, but it's not like, oh, like, he got to AAA and then just gave up a bunch of bombs, but the ERA was still okay. It's not like he was, like, just a little bit worse. It was like, what happened? Like, what happened to this guy? And like you mentioned before with the 4+ pitches, the long-time comparison that he got is Clayton Kershaw. And if you look at his delivery, there's a little bit of a similarity, especially with maybe not with the leg kick, but it's kind of this very simple, straightforward delivery. I don't know, man. Like, do you think that it was the alternate site? Do you think something happened? Do you think there's something that they're not telling us? Because maybe we should have known that the Padres, when they had their huge splash in 2021, trading for Snell, trading for Darvish, trading for Musgrove, maybe that was a sign that they were like, uh-oh, like, maybe Gore is not what we thought he would be?
Yeah, and if I remember right, just going back to the Markelle Fultz comparison for a second, I think he talked about a shoulder injury is the reason that ultimately happened. And I kind of, like, I have to wonder about Mackenzie Gore. Was there some sort of injury? Was there some sort of like mechanical imbalance? Or was it just tried to correct and fix something in the delivery and screwed everything up? And when you look at Mackenzie Gore, there's like 3 different eras of Mackenzie Gore, right? So there's the 2019 where he has a 1.69 ERA, a 0.83 WHIP. I mean, just absolutely dominant in the minors. And then after the alternate site and all of that stuff, they start him at AAA. He's at El Paso. 5.85 ERA, 1.8 WHIP. Not great. Like we said, goes down for 2 months. When he comes back, he starts in the Arizona Complex League, goes to High A, finishes the year in Double-A, throws a combined total of 30 innings, 202 average, 43 strikeouts, 16 walks. He wasn't back to normal with his control, but he looked a lot better. And so part of me just wants them to come out and say, yeah, he was hurt. He had some sort of, whether it was a shoulder, an elbow, or something that maybe he was working through. He was trying to adjust what he did to work around something that was sore, something that didn't feel right. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but everybody who's written off Mackenzie Gore, I want people to understand still, he's still on time, on track to debut as normal. So from 2010 to 2016, I kind of did a little bit of research today. Just over 500 pitchers were drafted and signed out of high school in that time period. 42 of them have thrown 100 innings in a major league season. And on average, it took them 6 seasons to do that. So 2023 is 6 seasons for him. Now, we think it's less because there's some of the notable exceptions. Chris Paddock is a guy your listeners know very well. Took him 4 years to get up and throw 100 innings.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they know him very well. Didn't mean to bring up bad memories there.
No, it's all good.
Jack Flaherty's a guy. Took him 4 years to get up and do that. Jose Fernandez, God bless him, took him only 2 years to go from high school to throwing 100. But the average is still 6, and there's guys on the other end of that. Adrian Hauser of the Brewers took him 8 years. I think it was Max Fried took him almost 8 years. So
and Max Fried's great. That's a great.
And Max Fried's great. He's a great pitcher. He just won a World Series. So if you're worried about Mackenzie Gore and you've written him off as not being able to contribute, remember that he wouldn't have contributed until this year or next year anyway. On average for a high school pitcher being drafted. So I think when they go out and they trade for Darvish, they trade for Snell, they trade for Musgrove, that may have been something where they were hoping that they would get Mackenzie Gore available. But timeline-wise, it's not like he's out of sync. And you have to remember, too, he lost a year with the pandemic. He didn't have actual competition. Yeah. All he had was alternate site stuff, which obviously didn't work out that well for him. So I still think he has the ability to be a good starter. Guys that took longer than 6 years doesn't mean they were bad. Blake Snell took 6 years. He won a Cy Young. Tyler Glasnow took 7 years. He's a good pitcher. So just because he might take a little longer doesn't mean you're a bad pitcher. And, 2023 would be 6 years for him. So if he comes up and throws this year, if he looks good in AAA to start the season and they call him up, he's ahead of pace despite having lost pretty much 2 entire full seasons.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing, right? Where I think that oftentimes the thing that I love talking and breaking down prospects, but there's some freaks out there. And what I mean by that is the people who are like, I wouldn't trade right now Adley Rutschman for Ronald Acuna because that's how good. That some people forget a lot of these guys will become, even the top level prospect, they'll become good major league players. And sometimes people they get a little bit too excited about the new, is what I've noticed. And I think that maybe, just maybe, the Mackenzie Gore situation was a situation where people were betting in their heads that, oh my God, Clayton Kershaw, he's going to come up now and be awesome. Maybe you just brought up Max Fried. I think that's a great name to get Padres fans excited. Don't get me wrong. Is it just taking out one name? And there's probably some other guys who didn't pan out. But even still, it is a good example of, hey, everyone's got their own track. If Mackenzie Gore is still only 22, 23 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not like he debuted and was a mess. At least we know there's still potential here. And at least we know that, it's hard, right? Maybe the big thing that happened here is the miss wasn't on him as it's on his talent, but maybe it was, okay, let's calm down with the, the Steve Carlton, Clayton Kershaw comparison, that they're going to be ready next year, rookie of the year, he's going to be an ace immediately. Maybe we missed on that, but did we miss on a serviceable pitcher? Maybe. And I think Padres fans might forget, like, even if he's a good, solid number 3, that's still huge, even if it isn't what you necessarily thought it was going to be at the top and what you might have been betting on.
Yeah, and I think at this point, kind of like looking at how the Padres dealt with pitching last year, you can't turn away from a number 3 pitcher. Like, that's a thing that the Padres absolutely need. You have to have that. And part of me wonders if some of it was the hype and the stress kind of combined to throw him off. And that's something when you look at people who have talked about having the yips before, and I keep coming back to Rick Ankiel because I spent so much research on him, but they talk about it's a combination of feeling some sort of pressure and stress and then having something bad happen and immediately questioning yourself, and it spirals. And so it's possible that maybe just the expectations of this is the next Clayton Kershaw just did something to him where it was too much. It's possible that, for all we know, maybe they came to him and they said, hey, we're getting ready to add you to the roster and let you pitch during 2020. I mean, maybe it was something like that and we don't know about. But when you watch him pitch, he's still a good pitcher, and I still think he can contribute. The question's going to be, one, where do you start him off at, and how that does? And then 2, how does he respond the first time he deals with adversity? And that's something, and I'm not saying that there's any sort of issue with him, but I think if it was something where it was like the yips or some sort of stress kind of thing caused him to get inside his own head, and it's more of a mental issue than a physical issue, then having to deal with some sort of failure is going to be good for him, provided he can rebound from it and he's learned the ways to get himself back on track. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Football is over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. So from the latest odds and totals and player performance props, even to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all your sports betting needs. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, all the way down to Olympic coverage. Do you want to know who's going to win at curling? BetOnline can give you odds for that. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline is where the game starts.
I think for the last topic of the show, I want to ask you kind of what you think the Padres should kind of feel going forward, right? Like, how do you address this thing going forward? Because I think the big thing some people are wondering is trade value and whatnot. And also, I wanted to, at the end of the show, just talk about you, because you are the new host of the podcast after all. So maybe we probably should have started with that, talking about you. That's usually how these things go. But then again, like Mackenzie Gore, there's been a lot of chaos in the development process and cycle and whatnot. But let's start with that. What do you think the Padres should do in terms of the future, given that they are a team that is supposedly built to win now? Do you think there's a valuable trade piece, or do you think that they would be selling really low on what his potential and what overall value could be?
So, second part, I definitely think that if you trade Mackenzie Gore now, you're selling very low on his potential. There's a lot of teams still look down, and I'm not saying this is right, but a lot of teams still look down on things like the yips, and they see it as a sign of mental weakness, and it's not. You know, it's something that happens to people across all sports. I mean, you see it in golf, you see it in tennis, you see it gymnastics, you see it everywhere from people who play at the highest level. So I think the best thing for the Padres to do is to put Mackenzie Gore in situations where he can be successful. You know, he did well at the end of the year in Double-A last year. Maybe that's something, and I talk about this a lot on, I believe it's Monday's show, about oftentimes when you have a pitcher coming back from injury who's missed some time competitively, you start them low in the system and you prepare to run them through to try to find their true talent level. So like the Braves ran Spencer Strider from low A all the way up to MLB last year. He's probably going to start at Triple-A. The Angels ran Davis Daniel all the way up through Triple-A. They're going to start him at Double-A this year. And so take Mackenzie Gore, start him lower, but be aggressive with the promotions. And the idea is you have him with coaches he's comfortable with. You have him in situations where he has the talent advantage over most of the guys he's on, not everybody, but most of the guys he's on the field with. So you put him in the best situation to be successful so that he can internalize these good mechanics and the good results that come from them. Because so much of pitching is mental. So much of it is having confidence in your stuff, having confidence in your ability to do what you want to do with the baseball. So start him low, aggressively promote him through the system until you find where he's comfortable and let him pitch. And once he gets into a groove and can do it repeatedly, outing after outing after outing, only then do you discuss, do we need to look at bringing him to the major league level? But if you trade him away, I mean, right now, that is the best fastball in the Padres system. You are selling incredibly low on a guy that I think, I mean, as he is right now, is probably a number 3 guy. And if he gets back to the form he had, can be a number 2 or number 1 guy. I mean, the 2025 rotation is going to have him at worst number 3, assuming he's the same we saw at the end of last year. So keep him in there, run him through the system, let him figure out where he's comfortable, and then just let him coast. Let him coast for a while, build up the confidence, build up the aggressiveness, build up the certainty that I am back to what I was. I know what I am doing, and I'm going to get some dudes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've felt for a while, I actually had a tweet about this, about the movie Holes, if you've ever seen that, where, you know, the main character and their family, they get cursed because they do not lift Madame Zeroni up the mountain. I've had this feeling that, like, there's a possibility that trading Gore is going to look really bad for the Padres in the future. And I do get it. I get it, though, because this is a team made to win now. You have a lot of win now pieces. Can you get a good asset for him? It's possible. It makes sense. I don't want to say no outright to the idea of trading him, because I don't know if they trade him tomorrow and I hear that they got the Oakland A's Matt Olson somehow in return. Like, yeah, I'm going to be like, okay, like, at least that was really cool. We don't know what teams, how everybody feels about it. That's another good point to make about prospects, is that not everybody just logs on to Baseball Reference or Baseball America and is like, oh yeah, that's the guy we can't trade, right? Like, everyone views prospects sort of differently.
And that's the big thing you kind of touched on, is no prospect is untouchable. I mean, like, absolutely nobody's untouchable. If the right package comes along, you will trade anybody. And so if somebody says, like, absolutely do not trade him, know that, what if somebody says, hey, do you want Mike Trout?
Yeah.
I mean, probably not going to happen, but no prospect is untradeable. It's just a matter of getting the right value for them. And I don't think another team is going to give you the right value for Mackenzie Gore.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to think about that too. Like, I know we have, like, incredible reporters around every team, but there's got to have been some fun, insane trades that we never find out about, like movie scripts that never saw the light of day. Like, I wonder if there's in the corner, like, the CIA classified file that, like, there was a Mike Trout trade out there, but it was so, like, you could not, because the Angels fans would lose it, that, like, they had to shove it in somewhere that they offered the Padres. They're like, give us Abrams and Gore, we'll give you Mike Trout, and no one ever knows about it, right? Like, it's I don't know, that conspiracy hobby is making an appearance right now, I guess.
That's what I miss about the old waiver system, where you could put a guy, like, after the trade deadline, you could put a guy on waivers and somebody could claim him. And if they claimed him, you either worked out a trade or you kept the guy. And you would see, like, back, this is like 10 years ago, you would see teams put anybody on trade waivers just to see.
Yeah.
You would never know, like, all of a sudden it's like,
stir the pot a little. Yeah.
It's like Mariano Rivera's on trade waivers. What?
Yeah.
Because, like, nobody's going to give you something that's the right value for him until someone does. It only takes one team. And, like, I miss that so much, as the trade is the waiver trades, because you would see some of those. I remember one year there was a deal where, like, Chipper Jones was moving for, like, 5 guys. And, like, it obviously never happened, but it was one of those, it was just great to talk about, like, here's that Mike Trout scenario.
Yeah,
here's that scenario. Yeah, what would it look like? Well, there you go. Here's where they tried to do it. So miss that.
Absolutely. Absolutely miss that stuff. But Lindsay, one of the last things I wanted to talk about now is you. All right. This is the fun part of the podcast, where we talk about you now hosting Locked On MLB Prospects. It was hosted by Armley, and a good friend of mine who's been on this podcast before. Now you are hosting it. You're on the YouTubes and whatnot. what are just some fun things that people can look forward to on top of your podcast? I imagine your listeners already know, for the Padres fans that are listening or watching, and just in general, I don't know. How's life going, man? You confident that the lockout will end? Like, what's going on? I guess.
I'm confident minor leaguers will report to camp. I don't necessarily know when the big league prospects are going to get there, but no, life over here is good. For those listening from the Padres side of the things who don't know about me, I'm a baseball writer for Sports Illustrated. I cover college baseball, and then on my show on Locked On MLB Prospects, we have a great time. We spend every Monday. It's either a mailbag Monday or a money Monday. We go back and forth. We talk business and sports, and then we take your questions back and forth. Tuesdays are always college baseball days. We've been previewing the different conferences. We previewed the Big 12, the SEC. Yesterday's show was the Big 10. We've got the ACC next week.
Awesome.
Wednesdays are always something like this, just a deep dive on something really cool. Maybe it's prospects that are probably not going to miss. Maybe it's, a player like Mackenzie Gore. Thursdays are usually a crossover. We'll bring on somebody else, a Locked On Royals, a Locked On Braves, and talk their farm system. Last week, we had a really fun, me and Jeff Carr from Locked On Reds did a Rookie of the Year draft. We each drafted guys who we thought would win Rookie of the Year. And then Friday is a Farm Friday where we talk about an entire, right now we're previewing entire divisions on their farm system. And then when the season starts, we're just going to pick one organization and go through their entire farm system, who's been looking good, who hasn't, how are the minor leagues teams doing, and who is really building their case to be in that top 10 next year. So a lot of fun. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Farm. And if you have any questions, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com. Other than that, just check the show out. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, like the show, tell your friends.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Hey, look, and I must say that draft thing, you're speaking my language. You're talking to a fantasy degenerate. So any draft related thing, we could do a draft on candy bars. We could do a draft on Lego pieces. I got a Lego helicopter boy right here. We could do anything. I'm in. So I'm going to go watch that episode. That sounds like so much fun, man.
It was a fun one.
Talking to you too.
It was absolutely a fun one. And you're making me think that during the season, I need to do some sort of fantasy baseball thing about hey, if you're in a super competitive league, I was in a 20-team league last year. If you're in a super competitive league, here's the prospects you need to know about. You need to go grab because we're getting called up soon. It's a good idea.
Absolutely. And I'm going to redirect everyone in my league, if I'm in a dynasty league, to your podcast because I always win. And here's what I mean by that. I always like getting people in my leagues excited about prospects. Shout out my guy, one of my best friends, Mike Cavalier, who gets excited about a prospect like Eddie Butler. That's a throwback. And then he's just kind of neglects the part where you're supposed to also try to win now. So I really enjoy that. So please recommend them every player so that way they don't buy any fantasy baseball, and then meanwhile they're hoping that some guy will be good for you. So please, everyone, go check out Let's See over at Locked On Farm. But in all seriousness, man, this has been a blast. And for your listeners and whatnot, you guys can check me out at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, Locked On Padres on YouTube if you want to see me and my classic Muhammad Ali hoodie that I've been wearing for a while. This thing is so comfortable. Holy crap. So you can check me out on there, and at LO_Padres for the Twitter account for the show, where I've been ramping that up too. I've been interacting more with Padres fans on there if you want silliness and what have you. But otherwise, Lindsay, it has been a total blast, and hopefully we get baseball back sooner rather than later. That way we can do more and maybe cross over again in the future.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. Thanks for having me on, Javi. Appreciate it.